There are monsters that don't hide under the bed. They wear expensive suits, smile to your face, and shake your hand. And then, when you're already on the ground, broken by their betrayal, they come back to burn the photographs of your dead wife just to enjoy your pain. I know this because I lived it. The man who destroyed my career and stole my future came back for one last thing, my past, and he tried to turn it into ash. The fire itself was small, almost pathetic. It was confined to the old wooden shed at the back of my property. The fire department had come and gone, their verdict a shrug and a mention of faulty wiring. To them, it was just an old shed full of junk, a minor property loss. But as I stood there the next morning, breathing in the damp, acrid smell of charred wood and wet earth, a cold dread began to creep up my spine. It wasn't the shed I cared about. It was the sturdy cedar chest that I kept inside, tucked away in the driest corner. A chest that held the only thing in the world I still treasured. A chest that was now splintered open and empty. The story of how I uncovered the truth and got my justice is a long and twisted one. It's about more than just revenge. It's about reclaiming a memory that a monster tried to erase. If you want to hear how it all unfolded, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this journey. I searched frantically at first, my hands black with soot, telling myself it had to be here somewhere. Maybe the firefighters moved it. Maybe the force of the water blasted it into a corner. But the more I looked, the sicker I felt. The rusty toolbox was still there, fused shut by the heat. My old lawnmower was a melted heap of plastic and metal. But the leather-bound photo album, the one Eleanor had put together over 20 years of our life together, was gone. Not burned, not singed, not waterlogged. Vanished. It was the only thing missing. And in that moment, I knew this was no accident. That's when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Mark, my former business partner. The man who smiled while he stabbed me in the back, stole our company, and left me with nothing but lawyer's fees and a ruined name. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. I answered, "Michael, my God, I just heard about the fire from a neighbor." His voice was slick with the fake sympathy he was so good at. "Are you all right? Is the house okay? I was so worried." "I'm fine, Mark," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. "The house is fine. It was just the shed." "Oh, thank God," he sighed, the performance of relief so perfect it was almost believable. Still, what a terrible thing to happen. After everything you've been through, if you need anything, a place to store some things, a bit of cash to help rebuild, you know I'm here for you, buddy. He called me buddy. The word hung in the air between us, an insult wrapped in false friendship. As he continued to spew empty condolences, I looked at the wreckage around me. I pictured him under the cover of darkness, forcing open that chest. I saw him taking the album, not to keep, but to destroy. To inflict one final cruel wound that no one else would ever understand. He didn't know I kept it in the shed. Or did he? He must have watched me. The thought made my skin crawl. There was no proof, just a gut-wrenching certainty. He had done this. And as he finally finished his monologue and hung up, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt a strange, cold clarity. He thought he had taken the last piece of Eleanor from me. He was wrong. He had just given me a new reason to live. Mark's voice on the phone wasn't just a voice, it was a key, turning the lock on a room in my mind I had kept sealed for a decade. A room filled with the ghost of broken promises and the bitter taste of betrayal. Before he was the monster who destroyed my life, he was my best friend. We were the classic garage startup story. Two ambitious guys with a brilliant idea, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared dream. We were going to revolutionize data storage with a new kind of compression algorithm. We called our company Nexus Dynamics, and for a few glorious years it was our entire world. The betrayal wasn't a single clean cut. It was a slow, methodical poisoning. It began when we were on the verge of securing major funding. Mark started having private meetings, pre-briefing our potential investors, he'd say. He framed it as being strategic, getting them comfortable with our vision before the big pitch. I was the creator, the technical mind, while he was the charismatic salesman. I trusted him completely. That was my fatal mistake. During the final presentation, I laid out our entire roadmap, the one we had spent countless nights perfecting. Then Mark stood up. With a look of grave concern on his face, he presented a revised plan, a safer, more conservative version that he claimed he developed to protect the company from my overly ambitious and risky projections. He used my own words against me, twisting my passion for innovation into a narrative of reckless endangerment for investors' money. He even produced falsified emails cleverly edited to look like I was ignoring his sensible warnings. He painted himself as the reluctant hero, the one who had to step in to save our creation from its own creator. The board, full of the investors he had already charmed and manipulated, sided with him. I was voted out of my own company in less than an hour. The legal battle that followed was a joke. He used the company's money to hire a team of ruthless lawyers, while I was forced to drain my savings just to show up in court. He took everything: our technology, my reputation, my financial security. He left me socially and professionally radioactive. During that dark time, Eleanor was my only anchor. She never once doubted me. She would sit with me through the night as I raged and despaired, holding my hand and telling me, "Your mind is something he can never steal, Michael." She helped me piece my life back together, not with money, but with purpose. And the photo album, that was her project. It was her way of reminding me of the life we still had, the love that no bankruptcy could touch. Every picture was a testament to our survival. And now, standing by the ashes of my shed, I understood. Destroying that album wasn't an afterthought for Mark. It was the final calculated move in a game he had been playing for 10 years. He wasn't just trying to hurt me. He was trying to erase her. He was trying to kill the last part of me that had survived his first attack. The days that followed Mark's phone call were a blur of quiet, methodical work. The insurance company sent an adjuster who confirmed the fire department's verdict of faulty wiring and cut me a small check for the shed's structure, a sum that felt like an insult. I took the money without argument. I wasn't interested in a legal fight I couldn't win. I was looking for something else. Every morning I'd put on a pair of old work gloves and go out to the charred remains of the shed. I told my neighbors I was clearing the debris to rebuild, but in reality I was conducting a forensic investigation with a shovel and a sieve. I wasn't looking for the album anymore. I knew it was gone. I was looking for a mistake. Mark was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. He wouldn't have left obvious evidence. But arrogance is its own kind of carelessness. I sifted through every inch of soot and ash, my gloved fingers probing the damp earth. I found the twisted remains of gardening tools, the shattered shards of clay pots, and the half-melted casings of old paint cans. It was a tedious, soul-crushing task. With every scoop of debris, the memory of Eleanor's laughter as she planted her first rose bush by the shed would flash in my mind, making the work feel like a desecration. On the third day, my shovel scraped against something small and hard. I almost tossed it aside with a pile of warped nails and screws. But something about the weight, the density of it, made me pause. I picked it up and wiped away the grime. It was a mangled piece of metal, blackened and partially melted, but the iconic shape was still there. It was a lighter. Specifically, a limited edition brushed chrome Zippo with a small engraved compass on the side. My breath caught in my throat. I had given this exact lighter to Mark for his 30th birthday, a decade and a half ago, back when we were still brothers in all but blood. "So you never lose your way," I had joked. He loved it, carried it everywhere. I knew for a fact he still had it a year ago. I saw him use it at a mutual acquaintance's funeral. He was a creature of habit and vanity. It wasn't proof. A lawyer would tear it apart in seconds. It could have been dropped any time by anyone. But I knew. He had stood right here in this spot, probably flicking the cap open and closed with that arrogant thumb of his before setting my world on fire. He had been so focused on destroying my memories that he had carelessly dropped one of his own. In that moment, staring at the ruined gift, the entire plan for my revenge bloomed in my mind, fully formed. I wasn't going to destroy his business or his fortune. That was the old me. No, I was going to expose his soul. I was going to show the one person who thought he was a god that he was, in fact, a monster. And I would use his own sick act to do it. Clutching the warped lighter in my palm, I walked back into my house and dropped it on the kitchen table. It lay there, a small, dark monument to Mark's depravity. For a moment, I considered my options. I could go to the police, present this flimsy piece of circumstantial evidence, and watch them file it away in a folder labeled unsolvable. I could hire a private investigator, spend a fortune trying to find a witness who probably didn't exist. I could confront Mark directly, give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain and watching him lie to my face with that perfectly practiced, charming smile. I had been down that road before. I knew how he operated. He would twist my accusations into the paranoid ramblings of a broken, bitter man. He would use his wealth and influence to paint me as unstable, obsessed. He had done it once, and he would do it again. The legal system was his playground, not mine. And as I stared at that lighter, I realized I wasn't looking for legal justice anymore. That was a fool's game. What I wanted was something far more personal. I wanted to burn down the lie he had built his entire life upon. The idea came to me not in a flash of anger, but in a wave of profound love for Eleanor. He had tried to turn her memory into smoke and ash. My revenge, my tribute to her, would be an act of creation, not destruction. I would resurrect what he had tried to kill. I would rebuild that album. I would hunt down every single photograph from every corner of the earth if I had to. I wouldn't just make a new album. I would create a perfect, identical replica down to the worn leather cover and the faded gold lettering on the spine. It would be a ghost, a perfect phantom of the past brought back to life. This mission became my new obsession, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I called it Project Rebirth. It was a slow, meticulous, and deeply personal war I would wage in secret. The goal wasn't to destroy Mark's company or take his money. It was to take his carefully crafted world, the one where he was a beloved husband and a pillar of the community, and place a single, undeniable piece of truth in the center of it. A piece of truth that would act like a poison, slowly dissolving everything from the inside out. He thought he had dealt me the final blow, but he had just handed me the perfect weapon. Project Rebirth began not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of an old desktop computer I hadn't turned on in years. The first phase of my plan was the most crucial, the digital hunt. I knew that physical copies were gone, but in our modern world, memories are rarely confined to a single object. They exist as scattered, forgotten ghosts in the machine, on old hard drives, dusty memory cards, and the far reaches of the internet. My first task was to find them. I spent a week digging through my own digital graveyard. It was a journey through a decade of technological clutter. External drives with corrupted sectors, old laptops with failing batteries, CDs labeled with faded markers. Each click was a gamble. Most of the time I found nothing but outdated software and mundane documents. But then I'd strike gold. A forgotten folder named Summer Vacation 2008 would contain a handful of blurry, low-resolution images. There was Eleanor, laughing on a beach, her face pixelated, but her joy perfectly clear. Each discovery was a jolt to my heart, a mix of pure happiness and the sharp sting of loss. But my own archives were not enough. They were a skeleton, and I needed to put flesh on the bones. This meant I had to reach out to people, and I had to do it carefully. I couldn't tell them the real reason. I couldn't say, my nemesis burned my dead wife's photo album, and I'm rebuilding it for revenge. So I crafted a believable, heartwarming lie. I created a new email address and sent out a carefully worded message to dozens of relatives and old friends. I told them I was working on a surprise digital memorial for Eleanor, a private website to collect and preserve her memories for future generations. It was the perfect cover story, sentimental, noble, and completely understandable. The response was slow at first, but then the emails started trickling in. Eleanor's sister from Seattle sent a zip file with photos from their childhood I had never seen. An old college friend of ours, now living in London, uploaded a gallery from a reunion party. With each email, a piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I became a digital detective, cross referencing dates, locations, and even the clothes they were wearing to piece together the original album's timeline. The folder on my computer labeled "The album grew day by day." It was becoming a mosaic of our life, or reassembled from the scattered memories of others. The most painful part was seeing Mark in some of the older photos, smiling at our wedding, holding our son at his first birthday party. Seeing him there, the ghost at the feast, only hardened my resolve. He hadn't just burned a book of pictures, he had tried to burn a life. And I was bringing it back from the dead, one pixel at a time. As the digital album on my computer grew, photo by precious photo, so did the central question of my plan: what to do with it once it was complete. The weapon was being forged, but I needed to identify the perfect target. Sending it to Mark himself would be useless. He'd just destroy it again and laugh. Leaking it to the press would be messy and ineffective, a minor curiosity in the news cycle. No, the delivery had to be precise, intimate, and aimed directly at the heart of his carefully constructed world. It had to go to his wife, Sarah. I knew very little about her. I had met her once or twice at company events years ago. A beautiful woman with a polite smile who seemed to float on a different plane from the rest of us. To understand her, to confirm she was the right target, I had to enter her world. I created a completely anonymous social media profile. No name, no photo, no friends. It was a ghost account, designed for one purpose only: to observe. Her public profile was a carefully curated shrine to their perfect life. It was a testament to the man Mark had become, or rather, the man he pretended to be. There were photos of them at glittering charity galas, Mark in a tuxedo, his arm possessively around her waist. The captions always gushed with pride. So proud of my wonderful husband, Mark, for his record-breaking donation to the Children's Hospital tonight. There were pictures from lavish vacations in Italy and the Caribbean, with Mark looking relaxed and magnanimous. The most revealing, however, were the personal posts. On their anniversary, she posted a photo from their wedding day with a long, heartfelt message. "Happy 15th anniversary to my rock, my soulmate, my moral compass. You are the best man I have ever known, and your integrity inspires me every single day." Reading those words, moral compass, integrity, sent a chill down my spine. It was nauseating, but also illuminating. She wasn't just his wife, she was his chief believer. She wasn't complicit in his lies. She was the audience for whom he performed his grand act of being a good man. I scrolled through years of this performance. Every post, every photo, every public declaration of love reinforced my theory. Mark didn't just crave wealth and success, he craved adoration. Specifically, her adoration. Her unwavering belief in his goodness was the foundation upon which he had built his new life. He was a king, and she was the adoring subject who made his reign feel real. It was then that I knew, with absolute certainty, that my plan was correct. I wasn't going to attack his kingdom from the outside. I was going to place a seed of truth in the hands of the queen and watch his empire of lies rot from within. While the digital hunt was my primary focus, life outside my computer screen continued. One Saturday, I was out in the front yard, pulling weeds from the flower bed Eleanor had planted years ago. It was mindless, therapeutic work. A car slowed down and pulled over, and I saw my old neighbor, Mr. Henderson, wave from the driver's seat. He was a kind elderly man who had lived across the street for 30 years before moving to a retirement community a state over after his wife passed. Michael, my boy? I was just in the area visiting my daughter and had to see if you were still holding down the fort. He said, his voice as warm as I remembered. We spent a few minutes catching up, talking about his grandkids and my quiet life. Eventually, the conversation drifted to the burnt out shed, the black scar still visible at the back of my property. I was so sorry to hear about that, he said, shaking his head. Just awful luck. First Eleanor, and now this. This old neighborhood has had its share of heartache. He paused, looking down the street thoughtfully. Funny thing, you know. The day it happened, my daughter had asked me to swing by the old house to pick up a box of my wife's old books I'd left in the attic. I must have been here just a few hours before the fire. I nodded, not really paying full attention, my mind on the digital photos I still needed to sort. And you know who I saw? He continued, his tone casual, conversational. Mark. Saw his fancy new Mercedes parked just down the block. I almost went over to say hello for old times' sake, but he seemed to be in a hurry. Didn't think he had any reason to be in this part of town anymore. My hands froze in the dirt. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I kept my eyes down, focused on a stubborn weed, praying my face wouldn't betray the explosion of confirmation that just went off in my head. A Mercedes. Mark had posted a picture of his brand new dark gray Mercedes on Sarah's social media just a month before the fire. That is strange, I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I haven't seen him in years. Yeah, well, that's life for you, Mr. Henderson said, oblivious to the storm he had just unleashed within me. People move on. We said our goodbyes and he drove off, leaving me kneeling in the garden. I stayed there for a long time, the silence of the afternoon buzzing in my ears. The lighter was my proof. The social media profile was my strategy. But this was the final nail in the coffin of any doubt. He was here. It wasn't a theory or a gut feeling anymore, it was a fact. Mr. Henderson's innocent, offhand comment was the last piece of validation I needed. My quiet, methodical project was no longer just an act of remembrance. It was now an act of pure, undeniable justice. With Mr. Henderson's unwitting testimony echoing in my mind, the final piece of my resolve clicked into place. The hunt was over. I had amassed a collection of over 200 digital images, a ghostly echo of the original album. The next phase of Project Rebirth required me to become not a detective, but a craftsman. I had to give these digital ghosts a physical home. Finding an identical album was an odyssey in itself. Eleanor had bought the original from a small, family-owned leather shop during a trip to Florence, years before such places had websites. It was unique. I spent weeks scouring online auction sites and contacting specialty bookbinders, sending them the few old photos I had where the album itself was visible in the background. Finally, I found a retired artisan in Vermont who recognized the style of binding. For a price, he agreed to create a perfect, custom-made replica based on my specifications. The same dark brown leather, the same number of thick, cream-colored pages, the same simple, embossed gold lettering on the spine. Our story. When the package arrived, my hands trembled as I opened it. The smell of new leather filled the room. It was perfect. An empty vessel, identical in every way to the one Mark had turned to ash, yet devoid of history. It felt cold, impersonal. My job was to fill it with life. I had each digital photo, professionally printed on high-quality, semi-gloss paper, matching the finish of the originals as best I could remember. Then, over the course of a week, I began the ritual. Every evening, I would clear the large oak table in my dining room, lay out the blank album, my stack of photos, and a pot of archival quality adhesive. One by one, I began to piece my life back together. This was the most painful and yet the most healing part of the entire process. Each photograph was a doorway to a moment I thought was lost forever. I wasn't just gluing paper to a page, I was reliving our life in chronological order. There was the first photo we ever took together, a goofy selfie at a county fair, both of us with mustard on our faces. I placed it on the first page and could almost feel the warm summer sun. Then came our wedding, Eleanor looking radiant, me looking terrified and deliriously happy. I lingered on that one, tracing the outline of her smile with my finger. I carefully positioned the pictures of our son's first steps, his toothy grin on his first day of school, our family vacations at the lake. With each photo, the empty album grew heavier, warmer. It was no longer a cold replica, it was becoming a vessel of our shared soul. I worked slowly, deliberately, letting each memory wash over me. The waves of grief were immense, but for the first time in years, they were matched by waves of profound love and gratitude. Mark had tried to destroy this. He had looked at a life filled with this much joy and decided to burn it. The thought didn't bring rage anymore, it brought a calm, chilling certainty. He wasn't just a thief, he was a void, and I was about to show his wife the monster she had been sleeping next to. Finally, I reached the last photo. It was a simple one, taken just a few months before she passed. Eleanor was in her garden, laughing at something off camera, her hands covered in dirt. It was my favorite. I carefully placed it on the last page. The album was complete. It lay on the table, a perfect resurrection. A beautiful, powerful, and righteous lie, ready to tell the truth. The finished album sat on my dining room table for 2 days, radiating a silent power. I would walk past it, run my hand over the smooth leather, and feel the weight of the memories inside. My work was done. Project Rebirth was complete. Now it was time to deliver the message. Timing was everything. I had learned from my research on Sarah's social media that her 45th birthday was on the following Friday. It would be a day of celebration, of gifts and praise, where Mark would undoubtedly be playing the role of the doting, perfect husband. It was the perfect day to introduce a ghost to the feast. On Wednesday morning, I took out a simple sheet of high-quality cream-colored paper, the same kind as the pages in the album. I thought for a long time about what to write. The note had to be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. It needed to be short, impossible to misinterpret, and designed to plant a seed of doubt that could never be uprooted. After several drafts, I settled on the final words. I wrote them out in clean block letters, using my non-dominant hand to disguise my handwriting. The note was brutally simple. Sarah, the man you call your moral compass, is a lie. This is a perfect replica of a photo album that belonged to my deceased wife. Ask your husband why he crept onto my property and burned the original. This is the kind of man he is when no one is watching. I didn't sign it. It didn't need a name. The album itself was the signature. I carefully placed the note inside the front cover of the album. Then I wrapped the entire thing in plain brown paper, securing it with packing tape. It looked like any other anonymous package. I found a sturdy cardboard box and packed the album inside, cushioning it with bubble wrap. I addressed it to Sarah using her full name at their lavish home address, which was easily found online. The return address section I left completely blank. To ensure anonymity, I drove 2 towns over to a small post office where no one would recognize me. I paid in cash for priority shipping, calculated to arrive on Friday. The postal worker, a cheerful woman who asked no questions, slapped a tracking label on it and tossed it into a large canvas bin behind her. As I walked out of the post office into the bright afternoon sun, I didn't feel a rush of victory or a surge of adrenaline. I felt a profound, almost unnerving calm. I had taken my grief, my rage, and my love for Eleanor and forged them into a single, undeniable object of truth. I had resurrected a memory and sent it not as an attack, but as a revelation. Driving home, I knew I would not check the tracking number. I would not spy on the Sarah's social media or ask around for news. My part in the story was over. I had placed the truth on her doorstep. Whether she chose to open the door and what she would do once she saw what was inside was entirely up to her. The bomb had been delivered. All I had to do now was listen for the silence that would follow the explosion. The weeks after I sent the package bled into months. I deliberately built a wall of silence around myself. I didn't search for Mark's name online, and I stopped looking at any social media. I needed to let it go, to trust that the truth, once released, would do its own work. I began to focus on my own life again. I cleaned out the garage, started hiking on the weekends, and even took a beginner's course in woodworking. For the first time in a decade, I felt a sense of lightness, as if a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years had finally been taken off. I was no longer a man defined by a betrayal, I was just Michael again. The news, when it finally came, found me. It arrived in the form of a phone call from an old colleague, a man named David with whom I was still on friendly terms. He was a notorious gossip, and after a few minutes of small talk, he got to the real reason for his call. "You are not going to believe what's happening with Mark," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "It's the talk of the town. Sarah filed for divorce, and it is messy. I mean, legendarily messy." I just listened, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. "She's telling anyone who will listen that he's a sociopath," David went on. "Apparently, on her birthday, she received some kind of proof that he did something truly monstrous. Something involving destroying mementos of a deceased person. Nobody knows the full details, but the fallout has been nuclear. His biggest charity backer pulled their funding, and I heard he was asked to step down from the board at the country club. The man is a social pariah overnight. He built this pristine image, and she just shattered it into a million pieces." After the call, I sat in my quiet house and looked at a photo of Eleanor on the mantel. I didn't feel a triumphant surge of victory. I felt a deep, profound peace. Justice hadn't been about watching him burn. It had been about reigniting a light he had tried to extinguish. The world he had built on lies was his prison, and Sarah, his most devout believer, had become his judge and jury. My part was done. A month later, I put my house on the market. It was full of memories, but they were no longer haunted by Mark's shadow. They were mine again, pure and whole. I sold it to a young family, and watching their children run through the yard where Eleanor had planted her roses felt like the perfect final chapter. I packed a few bags, the original lighter from the fire, and a single, perfect photograph of my wife. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the journey. My past was finally at peace, which meant my future was finally my own. So, that's my story. It's a question I've asked myself 1,000 times since. Did I do the right thing? What would you have done in my place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you appreciate stories where justice is served in the most unexpected ways, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another story.